Okay, so the first thing we need to do before we start taking off this radiator is draining the oil out of the engine. The reason we do that is because the oil in the sump, it supplies all of the components that require oil. And if we start taking off bolts that are holding oil in, or seals that are holding oil in on different parts of the bike, such as the radiator, we're gonna start getting oil coming out everywhere. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna grab an old sort of shallow washing up basin. I've got a funnel here as well. The funnel is purely so that I can then pour what oil comes into a can of some sort. I use an old rusty jerry can for fouled oil and fouled fuel and everything like that. And then when that's full, I go and dispose of it properly. Make sure you do the same. Don't just go dumping it into a hedge or down the drain or something. Think of the seals, man. So let's get on with that. It's a really simple process. You just got to make sure this is in place before you start taking the sump plug out. So to start the process, I like to put a piece of wood underneath the kickstand. The reason I do that is it levels out the bike underneath, allowing me to get that pan in underneath. So I always like to hold the brake. Always good to hold the brake if you're not in gear. Chuck that underneath, straighten the bars out. Give it a little tug. Maybe worth putting it in gear right now. And there we are. And that allows us to then get that pan that I showed you earlier. This one here. That will allow it to go underneath, ready to catch any oil. So this here is the sump plug under here. This is where we're going to put our tub to catch all the oil. It always helps to run your engine if you can before draining your oil, because it loosens everything up and it will stream out a lot quicker. This is the kind of thing that if you're just doing an actual oil change, you really should leave this for as long as you can for those little droplets to start coming out right at the end. If you can start doing this at sort of 6, 7 o'clock at night and leave it till the next morning, that's the best way to do it. This is just a standard nut here that we need to undo. And then once that's out, all the oil will start pouring out of the engine. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to crack this nut free. We're not going to take it all the way out. We're just going to crack it free, and then we'll be able to do the rest of the undoing using our hand. And that means we can get that bowl in place so the oil doesn't piss out all over the place. So let's crack it free. Okay. So that is now effectively loose. We'll move our pan in underneath, and it's always a good idea if you've got them to put gloves on right about now. Don't worry if you can't get your hand on it, just let the bolt fall into your pan that you're going to be catching your oil in. You can always fish it out later. Now we're just going to let that sit for a good hour or so to let that completely drain so that we can start working on the rest of the bike. Okay, so now that we've managed to drain that oil pan for about 45 minutes to an hour, it's gone down to a really slow drip. There is still going to be oil in there because it's coming from different parts of the bike. Again, if you are able to run your bike before you drop the oil, it's going to make this process a little bit more thorough. So feel free to do that if you want. Run it for 10-15 minutes, let the engine reach running temperature, and then drop the oil after that. Just make sure you turn the engine off before you start draining the oil. Sounds stupid, but I know someone who's done it. So let's get down to getting this radiator off. It's just a couple of screws and bolts first, and then we'll be able to get down to the pipe connections and all that sort of thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just crack open these nuts up here, these bolts. We're not going to actually take the radiator off right now because I think it's going to be a lot easier if we leave it in place while we deal with the union bolts at the underside of the engine. So we're going to crack these two free. We've got two up here and we've got two underneath the radiator as well. Top ones are 10mm and I believe the bottom ones are 8mm. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a union bolt here for this pipe that comes down from the radiator, and we've got one on the other side next to the oil filter as well. So we're just going to crack these free, and we're going to put down a rag underneath because there will probably be some oil coming out underneath. Cool, so that's cracked free. And the other one is located under here. And that one's free as well. So we've got a couple of clips to take note of. We've got one on the starter motor here, which helps hold this pipe in place. I'm not going to take off the unions from up here. I'm going to see if I can take the whole thing off in one piece. So you want to go ahead and undo the union and be prepared for a little bit of oil to start coming out of these. If you don't know what a union bolt looks like, that's what it is there. You see how it's got a hollow center and holes around the side? That's to let the oil in through the bolt. I'm actually going to loosen off this side clamp here so that we can get that out. So this is your starter motor. So if you ever need to crank over the engine without the ignition switch, you can always put a positive and negative feed directly to it. I'll do a video on that because when we do a compression test later on in the build, we'll obviously need to adjust some bits and pieces and we'll need the starter motor to crank over. So that bracket has come free. I'm going to put that bolt back in there for a minute and we should be able to pull that bracket off like so, that bracket. That then releases this pipe. Now we can't feed this through because these braided pipes are really quite strong and this is metal at the bottom here. So we're going to leave this for the minute, and when we've taken off the rest of the actual housing and the bolts and we remove it, it should be able to feed straight through. So now that that union bolt is free, you can see that the actual feed for the oil is gone as well, and we can now continue to take off those bolts that we started with and try and get the whole radiator to come off. Okay, so that's it for today, guys. Well done on removing the radiator. I hope you were able to follow along easily and that it was straightforward enough for those of you that are just getting involved. All it takes to get involved with these sorts of things is just a little bit of confidence. You know, as long as you follow along what other people are doing or what the service manual says, you'll be just fine. Things do occasionally go wrong, but there's always a way to get around them. Just don't do anything stupid like hitting things with hammers, you know, repeatedly just because you're getting stressed out. Take your time and everything will be fine. In part 7, we're going to take a look at that hydraulic clutch. We're going to remove it and we're going to get back to that wiring loom so we can get the whole thing out. The wiring loom down where the rear air box used to be sat has a few things in there that I want to cover in a little bit more depth, including the coil packs and the fuse box and the boost sensor and all those sorts of things. So rather than just sort of grazing over it at the end of a video like this, I want to do a whole video based on that wiring loom. So we'll do a part 2 for the wiring loom. But if you've got any questions, leave them in the comment section below, hit the like button, and don't forget to hit the subscribe and the bell button as well. If you hit that bell button, you'll get a notification every time I upload a new video. Quickly before I go, what did you guys think of the audio in this video? The audio should be a lot cleaner and a lot closer to you. Should feel like there's more presence to you when you're listening to it. So let me know what you think of that. I've messed around with the lighting a little bit in here to try and make it a bit more balanced across the entire video. Let me know what you think. I'm hoping it sounds as good as it should for you guys watching on YouTube. So anyway, take care guys. I'll see you soon.